Welcome to this webinar. We're producing, Jeremy and I, in concert with our partners at the Hemp Beverage Alliance. And because I can't help myself, the first thing I want to do is, if you haven't already, make sure to get our daily newsletter in your inbox every single morning. See, Jeremy's approving. He's our editor-in-chief. Yeah. Please get it. You go to cultivated.news to get that. It is the best read in the industry. It's quick, it's comprehensive. And you will be a smarter person for reading it every day. And speaking about being a smarter person, Jeremy, we're going to talk hemp-derived THC today, and not a day goes by, including this morning, where it's not topical on the federal level, on a state-by-state level. And that's why we're happy to be joined by Christopher Lackner of the Hemp Beverage Alliance to unpack the latest developments, state-by-state rules, things that are happening in Washington, what it all means for producers and retailers and the broader industry overall, and certainly to consumers as well, which are in lots of ways driving where this is going. Any thoughts, Jeremy, before we bring up Christopher?
I'm excited for this conversation. We have been covering the boom in hemp-derived THC beverages a lot. There's a lot of nuances to unpack, and I'm excited to see where this goes. I think it's probably, to me, the most exciting part of the industry right now, most growth. But, it's regulatorily challenging, and I'll leave it at that before I invite the ire of, all sorts of the sides of the issue. But it's quite an interesting subject, so I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah, and even this week, there's been news about Kentucky senators disagreeing with each other on this issue and what it means for bills making their way through Congress. There's certainly a Texas special legislative session, in part to address this issue, and then from around the country as well, which is why we like to, on a regular basis, check in with Christopher Lackner from the Hemp Beverage Alliance. So I'm going to bring up now. Hold on one sec. Hello, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Good to see you, fellas.
What did we already get wrong?
You got the exciting part right. Yeah, you got all the good parts right. You got all the awkward parts right as well.
It's a time to be alive, for sure. And before we even get into it and start peppering the questions, one of the things I think we talked about the first time we had you on, maybe a few months back, was that regardless of the regulatory landscape in which we're going to be talking about, consumers are really, this is something consumer driven, right? I mean, consumers want these products. They want to access them where they're accessing them safely and all that. But it really is a consumer-driven part of the world, and this is unlike maybe other parts of the sort of regulated cannabis industry. This one is really, consumers want this.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I think that we are seeing in this category in particular is that it might be oftentimes consumers who do not go to dispensaries. These are consumers that are looking for an adult beverage alternative to complement what they are already consuming, whether it's alcohol or a non-alcoholic beverage. Now they have another opportunity in a portfolio of beverages to choose from. And that's really what the big key difference is. Certainly, many of our consumers of hemp beverages are consumers of marijuana in whatever form they choose. But we are seeing a distinct difference in our category's consumers, in that a lot of folks are not traditional cannabis consumers and may never step into a dispensary. But when these products are on shelves next to the adult beverages in places where they already shop, in a store that they already trust, coming from a retailer that they may have known for 10 years in their neighborhood or whatever, these products are flying off the shelves.
Indeed, and I think that has caught the attention. That always catches the attention of certainly the regulated cannabis industry that we talk to a lot, but also the federal government and what we've all been looking towards over the past, year or more, is the Farm Bill and the reauthorization of the Farm Bill and what that means. You are the man with your ear to the ground the closest. And there's even as we speak, my sense is there's probably conversations happening in DC with where this current Congress will end up. Anything to share with our audience about what we're seeing or reading about on a daily basis with agreements or disagreements about where hemp will fall now and in the future?
Yeah, well, and first, I appreciate I have ear access, but there are a lot of ears to the ground in DC, and have been for a while. Traditional hemp partners that we all know have been advocating for our category, but also what's important to know is that large adult beverage concerns, specifically the wine and spirit wholesalers, have taken an active role in trying to develop a regulatory pathway for this category at the federal level. And so I think what's really inspiring about the hemp beverage category is that we're bringing together these new entrants, hemp beverage manufacturers, and kind of newish entrants like cannabis folks, but also these legacy strong reputation advocates for adult beverages, and it's really bringing together a very wide wide stakeholder coalition to move this category forward in DC. And I think that's really where the game change is. When you have folks that have been lobbying, Congress people for the past 20 years, they already have built-in relationships, they already have built-in understandings. And so that's going to help us over the long run. In terms of a regulatory framework at the federal level, I think we're still a long ways off from having these, very well-defined and established, and either going through FDA or TTP or a combination of the two, or very small possibility of a brand new department being established for it. But in the interim, what we are seeing is a better understanding of the value of the crop, and the better understanding of how hemp beverages drive demand for the crop, the hemp crop. And as a result, as you saw, when the folks start talking about, maybe putting a cap or putting an end to the category, they're getting reminders that this has significant implications up and down the supply chain. Farmers in Kentucky and throughout the country would, stand to be hurt tremendously. Farmers that have invested time and treasure, for the past 7 years, based on what the 2018 Farm Bill was explicitly stated. And so I think people are coming to realize that this impact of maybe a one or two people having an idea can have a ripple effect that could really devastate a lot of economies.
Chris, I want to turn to the state by state story. You touched on Kentucky. I was actually having a conversation just yesterday with a Kentucky hemp beverage brand. They said, they employ 100 people, consumers like the product, but the regulatory issues remain, right? We've seen not just in Kentucky, Missouri, California, Texas, they've all tried in certain ways to rein the industry in, right? It's interesting to talk to you because you see not just one business, but a lot of businesses in a lot of different states deal with these challenges. So, A, how do you advise, how they should talk to policymakers about, all the good things that are going on? And B, how could regulations move in a good direction at the state level that A, helps support the industry, and then B, goes towards the public health goals that these policymakers say they want to accomplish?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you can break the states down into three categories. They're the ones that have the absolute bans, states like California, and so there's no business to be done there. Then you have states where it's expressly and explicitly allowed, states like, Minnesota and Georgia and, 6, 8, 10, 12 other states that have a absolute regulatory framework that everybody can look to and abide by. And then you have the rest of the states that are kind of in this wishy-washy area where there is a regulations for the crop, but not necessarily for the finished product. We have seen, and Minnesota is an excellent example that we turn to again and again, that when the category is regulated sensibly, with reasonable taxes, with safety measures in place to protect the consumer, and with sensible milligram levels so that the consumer is getting value for the product, we see a tremendous success on all fronts. We see that industry thrives, we see that tax revenues are generated, and we see that public health incidents, particularly as they relate to hemp beverages, are negligible at best. Minnesota's had a hemp market before they had a marijuana market. And so you can look to see, is it, you can point to, well, this was a framework where it was just hemp products. and we can't really point to any public health incidents beyond what we would say is, unfortunate, and I don't mean to dismiss it, but not catastrophic. And so, as we continue to educate consumers about overconsumption, we continue to educate consumers about keeping products away from children, and as these products become, stocked, shelved, and advertised more properly, we're going to see those incidents go down. But when we look at states that have a regulatory framework in place, we know that it works. We know that it works outside of the dispensary model in adult age-gated locations like liquor stores, and age-gated retail, and age-gated 21 plus on-premise locations. And so, we want to replicate that idea in all 50 states. And we're seeing success. The ban bills in California and the ban bill or the veto or whatever happened in Texas, those get all the news. What you don't hear is Ohio had a ban bill on the table in November. We are working toward a regulatory framework in Ohio. Georgia had a framework, and then there was a ban bill that got introduced and got pretty far down the line in this last legislative session. And, cooler heads prevailed, and now, we continue to have a thriving market there. And we talked about this a little bit earlier before we went live, but, after Prohibition, it wasn't just smooth sailing for alcohol. There was a constant battle to fight for the category, individual states trying to, put the toothpaste back in the tube. And it was a constant battle to move the category forward, with whipsaw regulations that didn't make sense, that were sometimes in conflict with each other, and that were confusing and sometimes detrimental to the end consumer. Like, we're living that right now. And what I always tell people in our industry and our membership, ride the roller coaster, watch the roller coaster, don't ride the roller coaster. Because the whipsaw that we are going through right now is just exhausting.
Yeah. It is exhausting. It's exhausting it's interesting to watch, but it must be exhausting to be watching it, I guess, or to have to ride the roller coaster inadvertently.
Yeah.
And talk a little bit about that from your members' perspective. Like, talk a bit about like who your members are, who you represent, but also like when you're going to these legislatures or to the federal government, like what are the top concerns, or what are you trying to? Is it we want to get frameworks that make sense so we can all abide by them? Is it we don't want any kind of regulation? Like, talk a little bit about sort of the guiding principles of you and your members when you are advocating.
Yeah, and so the Hemp Beverage Alliance is the trade association for the hemp beverage industry. We have about 350 members in the U.S., Canada, and the United Kingdom. 50% of our membership are suppliers or brands, folks that you see on the shelves. The other 50% are supply chain partners, which could be anybody from a manufacturer to an insurance company to the guy that makes that does design work for a label, lawyers and everybody else in between. Our advocacy is pretty simple. Everybody up and down the supply chain, everybody on the supplier side wants regulatory clarity. We just want a playbook or a rule book that we can abide by. That's going to be consistent over time. We have a constant problem, and at our conference a couple weeks ago, we did a quick poll to see what the biggest challenges were for suppliers, and it was regulatory uncertainty. It's very hard to scale. It's very hard to get investment dollars. It's hard to get insurance, and your costs are just ridiculous when you are, having to. You anticipate the rules, play by the rules, and then you find out the rules have changed. And so that's something that we're absolutely trying to, get more clarity, more consistency, and more comfort for everybody that's in this industry, so it can really take off the way that it needs to.
Yeah. I want to ask, because as you know, we Cultivated get pushback for even having this conversation oftentimes, because there is this, I think, tension between the sort of heavily regulated cannabis space in every state, California to Massachusetts and everywhere in between that has legal cannabis, and the work you and your team and your membership are doing, and in some cases there's actually overlap between the two. So I want to be sure to say that there are many more cannabis brands today that are entered into the hemp-derived space than there were a year ago or two. But last time we talked, you talked about it, and we've talked to others, that this is really what you said at the beginning, which is this is an entry point for a lot of people into the THC world, and it's the lowest possible barrier because it's not in a dispensary. Talk a little bit about sort of what you say to folks who say, we think hemp-derived products should be shut down, taken off shelves, and really put into dispensary channels. Talk a little bit about sort of your thoughts when you get that pushback from, the big cannabis companies.
Yeah, and I think I need to apologize because I don't know if it's my system or your side that's having a little bit of an error. It might be mine, but very quickly repeat that question and I'll be.
I was just saying, like, what is when you hear from the, let's call it the traditional, the heavily regulated cannabis industry in places like Massachusetts and California, that your part of the world should be shut down completely because it's encroaching on theirs. What's your pushback to them?
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's necessarily maybe that Hatfield and McCoy framework is dissipating a little bit. I think as more understanding comes and more opportunity presents itself, I think folks are seeing that these are two different products, two different consumers, two different retailers, etc. Hemp beverages, particularly lower dose products, do not do well in dispensaries. They don't do well in dispensaries for a variety of reasons. There's the cost per milligram discussion that's had at the desk where people are going to get pushed to higher dose products. There's the logistics challenges that come with having heavy cans of water in your facility. And there's the marketing aspect of that people shop for beverage in a way that is different than other folks. And so, those are challenges that I think that cannabis companies are beginning to understand and recognize that we are not necessarily encroaching on their category at all.
Chris, there is a lot of discussion right now, as we talked about in Congress and state houses, state legislatures, about what effective hemp regulation looks like. If you could wave a magic wand, how would this look to you? What is the right way to support businesses, protect consumers, and sort of match all of these different incentives and different policy goals in a way that makes sense coherently?
Yeah, one more time on that, just to consolidate that, sorry. I'm going to have a talk with the Mount Prospect Public Library IT department here.
Yeah, no, you're good. You're good. Put it simply. If you could wave a magic wand and come up with coherent hemp-derived drink regulations, what would that look like?
Yeah. So the Hemp Beverage Alliance, if you go to hempbeveragealliance.org, at the nav bar at the top, you'll see our regulatory principles. And that lays out pretty much what we consider to be our best practices for a uniform regulatory framework at the state and potentially federal level. We understand that even a magic wand is can't move Congress. And so I think a better wand would be so a magic wand would be better put to use in kind of getting all the states aligned as best as that they can. So simple things like uniformity and labeling, uniformity and defining what a serving size is, and uniformity and testing is going to go a long way toward creating customer confidence and really allowing the category to thrive. We're not there yet, and it's going to be a couple of years, but we increasingly see states talking to each other. I was up in Michigan this week, and we talk about Michigan has second mover advantage right now in that they can look at what other states are doing and develop a regulatory framework that is taking the best of Minnesota and staying away from the worst of Florida. And I think that's really how it's going to be. We're going to go state by state. Everyone's going to continue to refine their frameworks as the category grows up and we figure out what works and doesn't work. Minnesota is pretty far in already and is already stricken some of their regulations off the books because one, they were unenforceable, or two, they were unnecessary. And I think this is kind of a good positive thing. We talk about the Wild West of this category, and the Wild West eventually got tamed, and a lot of us live in that Wild West now, and it's pretty nice. And so And so I think that we all need to recognize that, yeah, we are in this period in time of a huge shift in the way that we think about the plant, in the way that consumers think about adult beverages, in the way that we regulate products. And, there is going to be friction. There is going to be, reactions and reactions to reactions. And that's okay. It's part of our society moving forward and getting a new marketplace and a new product into the system. We've seen this with ride sharing. There weren't laws for Uber and Lyft before Uber and Lyft came to town.
Right.
Legislators don't spend their time legislating in anticipation of new markets. They react when they become, to get to a point where they need to be regulated, and that's where we are now.
Mm-hmm. Same thing with the Airbnbs of the world. I mean, it's
right.
Exactly.
Right. Until it becomes a real thing, it's not a thing. And I think I think your perspective is both has good historical precedent and has realistic timelines, and we'll all need to be patient as it happens. But I think that's why we like to have you on a regular basis to share both the insights of sort of the Hemp Beverage Alliance, as well as sort of what is happening sort of in real time in DC and across the states, and sort of a realistic view of what could happen or what might happen. So with that, Christopher, I want you to get back to the library work that you were doing. For those that Christopher's actually at a public library doing this call. Jeremy, I think, is at a co-working space. I'm also at an alternate location than usual. So it's the summer version of a cultivated webinar. So we appreciate the flexibility, Christopher, and thanks for your time.
Yeah, I apologize if you guys got a bad connection there, but always a pleasure to talk to you guys, and looking forward to do it again. Hemp-Beverage-Alliance.org if anybody wants to learn more.
Amazing. We just put it in the show notes as well. So again, that's Hemp-Beverage-Alliance.org. We are cultivated.news. So please find us all there. We'll be back tomorrow morning with This Week in Cannabis News at 10 a.m. Eastern on our LinkedIn and YouTube channels. Christopher Lackner from the Hemp Beverage Alliance, thank you so much for being here. Jeremy, my co-founder and our editor-in-chief here at Cultivated News. Thanks everybody for joining us. We'll be back again tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern. Thanks everybody.